Penguin fans need to sell a home or buy one? Go with the top producing team in the nation, the Amy Wenger team with eXp Realty. Serving Northeast Ohio for 28 years, experience real estate that achieves your goals and exceeds your expectations. Call today and tell them you subscribe to the Penguin Nation Fans podcast, and they will ensure that you are treated like family. Call 330-681-6090 or visit amysguarantee.com. Go Gwins. All right, welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Penguin Nation Fans podcast. As always, I am your host, Gino Leone. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at YTown Nation. And don't forget to check out my written work over on Redshirt Sports Today. The Penguin Pulse Hotline is back once again. This time I put out a prompt on Twitter and Instagram asking you guys if Youngstown State is a legitimate national title contender heading into the 2026 season. In order to qualify for your response to be featured on the show, I needed at least 1 to 2 sentences. Shout out to all my followers that gave a response. There was a lot of engagement with this on Instagram. Twitter, I put out a poll as well for the results. I'll go through that real quick. The results for the Twitter poll, 75.7% of people said that yes, YSU is a legit national title contender heading into 2026, and 24.3% said no. There were 37 votes on that poll. So it seems like, from what I'm gathering from the YSU fan base and what the overall offseason expectations have been for this team, is that yes, this is a team that can compete for a national championship. Let's dive right into these responses and see what you guys have to say. I'm excited to engage with these comments and talk about some storylines heading into the 2026 season. And again, I think this is going to be an exciting season, and I think the fan base is sort of echoing the same sentiments as me. So let's start with my guy, Mark Quigley. He said, "I can do it in 3 words. Offensive line and quarterback." This is such a good point by Mark, because it's not often for a team that you retain so much talent in the trenches along with one of the top quarterbacks in the FCS. Bo Brungard is a really, really outstanding quarterback. And on top of that, we have so much continuity along that starting offensive line. When I do my preseason previews, when I do my projections for the upcoming season, it always starts with 2 things. Actually, 2 things. It starts with the trenches and it starts with the quarterback. The other positions on your roster are replaceable. I know there's some talented skill position guys, and I certainly don't want to undervalue those guys, but if you don't have a quarterback, an offensive line, and a defensive line, you can have all the skill position talent in the world, and it's not going to matter when you play meaningful football. Down the stretch in November, really in the entire Missouri Valley Football Conference slate, if you play in a conference as good as the Missouri Valley Football Conference, you need depth on both lines of scrimmage, and I just think YSU has that. I did my projecting the starting 22 series for the YSU defensive front. I talked about in that episode how much depth this team has, and I think last season this YSU team proved that they could match the physicality of programs like North Dakota State, Michigan State, Illinois State, who's the national runner-up, and others. So the physical ability is there, and now it's really about capitalizing on the continuity we have been able to establish with Bo coming back, with our offensive line back, and if we can hammer down those positions and replace what's around them, I think this YSU team is more than capable of making a deep postseason run, but we'll have to see. I've said it all offseason. This is just all talk at this point. This is all preseason speculation. Injuries are obviously a part of this game. We hope that everyone remains healthy, but we'll see what this season shakes out to be. But again, preseason, when you look back in hindsight, the teams that are usually the most successful are the teams that have that experience in the trenches and they bring back a talented quarterback. So shout out to my guy, Mark Quigley. I appreciate you putting in that comment through Instagram. Next up, we have Kyle Searle. He says, 3 phases to a game. Yes, a legit contender. Do all the pieces fall into place? I said they were legit last year. Show they could compete with the best of the best. Came up short. Learn from it, grow, and compete again. First off, want to shout out to Kyle and everyone over on the Youngstown Penguin podcast. You guys do an outstanding job covering YSU football. Can't wait for your next episode to drop. Looking forward to another season of your guys' content. That's such a fun show. Make sure for my listeners to go check them out as well. They do an awesome job over there. So I think I completely agree here with Kyle. I think championships aren't won with just one great offense. You need offense, you need defense, and you need special teams. And when I was talking to Kenneth Donaldson, an interview I did a couple weeks ago, make sure to go check it out. He called this team a 3-court chain. He said there's an added emphasis in all 3 phases of the game. And last year, the offense absolutely held up its end of the bargain. Our offense was elite. We knew that offense was good to beat anybody in the country. We saw that on several different occasions. I mean, we dropped 40-plus points on Southern Illinois. We almost single-handedly beat North Dakota State with our offense. The defense struggled at times. We knew this, though, right? Heading into 2025, we knew to rebuild from that atrocious 2024 unit, it was going to take time to get better. Now, I don't think the jump we saw from 2024 to 2025 in terms of overall defense was significant enough. We should have had a defense that probably held teams to around, 25 points per game, 26 points per game. That would have been marked as a successful defensive season. That did not happen last season. The defense often was disappointing. We gave up way too many points. Our scoring defense was not good. Our total defense was not good. That was an issue. But let's not forget that special teams didn't show up in multiple games and cost us a couple of games. You look back at that North Dakota State game where we fumble a kickoff return. We give up a kickoff return for a touchdown. We give up a couple other explosive kickoff returns. I just went back and watched that game. There were a couple other kickoff returns where the coverage was pathetic in that game too. We gave up a lot of points on special teams, and there were a lot of moments where our kickoff coverage and our punt coverage just didn't show up. It almost cost us a game against Towson when we surrendered 2 fake punts. The odds of winning a football game when you give up 2 trick plays like that, not very good. The Michigan State game, we gave up a massive punt return that put Michigan State in the red zone, and we knew last season our defense was terrible in the red zone. Hopefully that gets corrected with Coach Remigio. I believe it will. But regardless, you need 3 phases of the game. And the encouraging part is that there are 2 new coordinators leading special teams and defense. Those are the 2 areas of concern heading into 2026. First off, let's start with Ryan Remigio. I think Ryan Remigio has all the makings of a home run hire at defensive coordinator. I just think his experience coaching at all 3 levels of the defense, playing in a defense before, I think there is not a single thing that Ryan Remigio doesn't have to his resume. He has a consistent track record of scheming up pass defenses, and that's what YSU's biggest weakness was last season. He has a track record of getting his teams to hold other teams out of the end zone. That's something that YSU struggled with a lot last season. If a team got in the red zone on YSU, it was basically game over because our defense put up no resistance and no fight in the red zone. You want to talk about run defense? Well, he coached the defensive line at Mercyhurst. He coached an elite defensive line in 2019. He knows how to scheme up good run defenses, and you would have to think at YSU, he's going to have more talent. He's going to have better players at linebacker and on that front line. So Ryan Remigio, I think, is going to be a splash hire. We'll see how good he can get this defense to be. It might take time for this 3-4 scheme to sort of adjust, maybe a couple of games it takes to gel, sort of like what we saw last season with Mike Yurcich's offense. That took a couple weeks to gel, right, to get that offense really going and to get to the things that we wanted to run. But once it clicked, it was a really good offense, one of the better offenses in the country, and that offense could hang with anyone. If this defense for Ryan Remigio for YSU next season is good enough to single-handedly win games, this is going to be an absolute force in Youngstown. Like, I'm not sure if YSU figures out a defense that can win you games like Ryan Remigio has been able to do in the past at Mercyhurst. Look out, because I'm not sure how many teams in the country are going to be able to hang with that, especially if you have an offense as good as we're projecting it to be. We have a defense, and then special teams. The last thing here, Thomas Fletcher. I love this hire as special teams coordinator. I think he has really emphasized how important special teams will be. And I said in the offseason, I wasn't a huge fan of last season's special teams coordinator. That's just how I view things. It's good to get a guy that has experience playing under Nick Saban and coaching under Nick Saban. If you listen to Curt Cignetti, national championship coach for Indiana, he talks about the time he spent with Nick Saban. He learned more than any other coaching stint in his entire career. That's valuable. And the fact that we get a guy that is in that Nick Saban coaching tree, has played under him, knows what it takes to compete for championships. This guy understands that you need special teams to win championships. So I'm super excited about him. And again, I'm hearing that this is a 3-court chain. Right? This is a team that is going to be tough to stop because there's 3 phases to a game and 3 units that back each other up. And that's going to be so hard to slow down. So the offense is already there. If the defense and special teams catch up, then this team absolutely becomes a legitimate national title contender. No question. And from what I'm hearing, from what I saw at the spring game, from what I saw at practices, this team 100% is seeing improvement on defense and on special teams. Thanks, Kyle, again for your question. Great question. All right, next question here is Barstool YSU. He says, absolutely, it's not often you have the best player in the country at the FCS level and a proven defensive coordinator. I agree a lot with what Barstool said here. I'd honestly be surprised if this defense doesn't improve significantly. Ryan Remigio has consistently built strong defenses everywhere he's been. I've talked about that a bit after answering Kyle's question. He's outstanding at adjusting his scheme to fit the personnel he has. That's one of the more underrated characteristics of a coach. You need a coach that is able to adapt to the players that he has in-house. No offense to John Hanline. I thought John Hanline helped a lot with improving that run defense from 2024 to 2025, but it felt like we could have utilized our players better at certain times, right? If your secondary is a weakness, you need to make changes to what you're scheming up in the secondary. I don't think we saw that. I just went back and watched the Southern Illinois game. We're putting some of our corners in one-on-one coverage with no safety help against some top-end receivers in the Missouri Valley. That's a battle that's going to be tough, especially if you have corners that are undersized or you have corners that have not performed well all season. You need to make adjustments to what personnel you have, and I think Ryan Remigio has done so. I think he has a proven track record of doing so, and I think a player like Mike Wells can absolutely thrive in a 3-4 scheme because of how versatile he is. To have Mike Wells, you basically have an extra linebacker and an extra defensive end on the field at the same time. I think Mike Wells 100% is going to be that centerpiece of next season's defense. It's going to be tough for opposing offenses to project where he's going to blitz from. Is he going to be in run defense? Is he going to drop off in coverage? You really don't know because Coach Remigio is giving him a lot of freedom. And that's, again, a testament to Coach Remigio making adjustments to the personnel he has. And I also think the secondary is going to take a step forward. Look, I'm not going to lie. It's always shaky when you have to replace so much in the secondary. It's not easy to get a bunch of transfers to gel together. We've seen this experiment before in Youngstown when we bring in transfers and it doesn't work out and it turns into a dumpster fire. But this season, I just think I would be surprised if we don't at least see some improvement in the secondary, especially considering the fact that the most consistent part of Ryan Remedio's resume has been scheming up pass defenses. That has been the thing that has sort of been his go-to. That's been his calling card. So I would really be surprised if he's not able to figure something out. And you would also have to figure that the talent he has here in YSU is better than Mercyhurst. So front seven on defense, again, loaded. I think the front seven has plenty of talent. It is much better than a lot of the national media realizes. That depth along the defensive line is really good. I'm excited to see what that looks like. I think linebacker, we have some dudes with Graydon Rollins and Karsten Marshall leading that group. So defensively, I love what we did with Coach Remedio. I think that's a great hire, and I think he's going to complement the personnel that we already have in-house. Offensively, the receiver room is loaded. Barstool YSU talked about this in his very long comment. The receiver room is just stacked with talent. There is a lot of depth here. I said that I think one of the big improvements we're going to see at wide receiver is I think we're going to have guys that are better at making contested catches. That's important, right? You can generate a lot of explosive plays if all Bo has to do is lob it up and Dorian Williams is 25 yards down the field mossing people, right? That's easy for you to do, and we have a lot of size in this wide receiver room, which I like. And I will say this, I was concerned heading into the spring about what the connection looked like between Bo Brungard and his wide receivers. After watching the spring game, that timing, his connection with those guys is not as big of a concern as I thought it would be, right? It looked like he knew where these guys wanted to go and he was connecting with his targets. Now, there's other guys in this room that need to get acclimated. There's some of the transfers that still need to develop that chemistry with Bo. But I remember heading into 2025, the chemistry that we saw with Bo and those receivers were not as good as what we saw this spring. I thought guys were running the right routes and Bo was hitting them at the right time. We saw a couple of breakout performances from guys like Dorian Williams, and I think the overall depth of the wide receiver room is better. Now, I've talked about my concerns about not having a top-end target like Max Tomczak, a guy that you can go to in reliable situations. But if you have 4 or 5 guys that are all really, really good, that's a lot of reliable targets to go to, and I think that could be very difficult for defenses to match up against. I think we have what we need in the slot with Lynn Weichel, the transfer from Grand Valley State, and Fresh Walters. That's a very good tandem in the slot. I like Lorenzo Jenkins, the transfer from Bethune-Cookman. I think he could have a breakout season. A lot of proven FCS production there. Dorian Williams, transfer from Ohio State, nice size. Connor Smith, transfer from Assumption. Brian Hunt. There's a lot of guys here that transfer in. It could have a great season. As far as Bo putting up even bigger numbers, because Barstool YSU said in his long Instagram comment that I didn't read the entire thing on, he said Bo could have a record-shattering year. That's a tough ask to me. Look, he had one of the greatest seasons in school history. I actually think he could become an even better passer. I think we saw that in the spring when he passed all over the yard against this defense. But statistically, I think his rushing production might dip a little bit just because this will be the third time many Missouri Valley Football Conference defenses have faced him. I just think you would have to think at some point somebody figures out a way to take away the running aspect of his game. Look, Bo's such a good player that the only way you can really beat him is to take the ball out of his hands. We saw that last season when Yale came into our place I don't remember what the exact number was, but they ran a crazy amount of plays in that second half, and Bo just wasn't on the field. And then when Yale's defense went on the field, they had broken YSU's offense because they took away Bo's running ability completely. So if you're going to beat Bo, you have to take away one aspect of his game. I would probably prefer taking away his legs. And I think in year 3 of some of these defenses, seeing that, you'll be able to adjust better and make better changes, although it's tough because, right, you still have to account for his passing ability because his passing ability is really good, and we have a lot of good receivers that will burn you down the field if you don't pay respect to those guys. But I just think it's going to be tough for him to match statistically what he did last season. But if you talk to Bo, the only thing he cares about is getting wins and losses, and I think that's the overall sentiment within the program. But even so, I agree with Barstool. There really aren't many obvious weaknesses on this football team, and that's the first time I think we could honestly say that about a team under Doug Phillips. When going through this roster, there's not many concerns whatsoever. You know, from top to bottom, defense, special teams, offense, sure, there's some unknowns there with our defense, special teams. What does that all look like? But I think we all agree that the cupboard is far from bare on defense and special teams. The talent is there. We know that Doug Phillips is a proven recruiter. He knows how to bring in the right talent. Just look at some of the guys Doug Phillips is recruiting on the 2027 recruiting trail. Like, this guy knows how to evaluate talent. The question is, can we get those pieces to gel together? And that will ultimately determine if we have a successful season. Gino Gualati says, yes, natty contenders. We have the roster and skill. Comes down to coaching. Coaching absolutely matters in January. You need a good coaching staff. If you guys watched that Illinois State Cinderella run to the national championship game last season, that wasn't by mistake. That coaching staff for Illinois State was phenomenal all postseason, really all season. At the beginning of the season, I remember they almost lost in overtime to North Alabama, who, by the way, was atrocious. And they made so many strides to get to beating North Dakota State in the playoffs, to dismantling UC Davis and Villanova, and then ultimately almost beating Montana State in the national championship in a game that, by the way, Illinois State dominated that second half and completely outcoached what Montana State was doing. So coaching is super important, and I'm actually pretty confident in this YSU staff. I think Doug Phillips has done an excellent job these past 2 off seasons. I talked about this in an article I did over on my Substack, the Penguin Nation Weekly, where I talked about how Doug Phillips has really hammered home these last 2 off seasons. And I think the biggest adjustments we have seen with Doug Phillips, especially these last 2 off seasons, is he has gotten very aggressive with his coordinator decisions. He let go of Troy Rothenbuehler, hired Mike Yurcich, new defensive coordinator Ryan Remedio, new special teams coordinator Thomas Fletcher. He has been more willing to make changes these past 2 off seasons because I think he understands that the window to win is right now. Right? He brought in Mike Yurcich because he wanted a guy that could coach and develop Bo Brungard, because Bo Brungard is Doug Phillips' recruit. Let's not forget that when giving credit for what Bo Brungard has been able to do. Doug Phillips is the guy that saw what Bo Brungard was capable of, and he's the guy that recruited him. And he ultimately hired a guy that could develop him into the player he is now. So, look, I think that the Yale loss forced everyone to look inward. I think it forced a lot of deep reflection. That was a crushing loss, a really bad loss where we didn't really make many second half adjustments. But I think you look at this coaching staff, Mike Yurcich, one of the most respected offensive minds in college football, both FBS and FCS. We saw what he was able to do in his days at Oklahoma State. He coached Justin Fields at Ohio State. We know what he's capable of. Ryan Remedio, tremendous reputation on defense, has experience working with an NFL team before. He has done it all throughout his career, just a stacked resume. Football is a game of adjustments, and I think with Mike Yurcich and Ryan Remedio at your offensive and defensive coordinator, I would be very surprised if many teams are able to out adjust us and out scheme us. I think something that we struggled with last season on defense was making adjustments on the fly. You look at that South Dakota State game, Northern Iowa, Yale. Yale was sort of the one that got captured by the national media where everyone was calling out our coaching staff. But with Ryan Remigio, I think we are going to be able to adjust much better on the fly. We saw all spring that Coach Remigio can hang with what Mike Yurcich is doing. He can hang with these guys. He hung with Montana State last season. He hung with Mike Yurcich last season too in the regular season. So I just think YSU has a coaching staff that is more than capable of making those in-game and week-to-week adjustments. And those are the things that championship teams make. And let's not forget, Doug Phillips is a connector. He's good at assembling a staff, and he lets his coordinators have a tremendous amount of freedom. And I honestly think that is a perfect thing heading into next season, because if you have a guy like Mike Yurcich, you have a guy like Ryan Remigio who has a head coach background, you want to give those guys freedom because they know what they're talking about. It's not like we have a defensive coordinator in there that doesn't know what he's talking about. We have a guy that can be trusted, and Doug Phillips is going to hand him the reins on defense, special teams, Thomas Fletcher. He's going to have that freedom as the special teams coordinator, and Doug Phillips' job is to manage the coaching staff and make sure people are collaborating to be a team leader. These players play for Doug Phillips. They love their coach. That's what he's there for. He's there to motivate, to build people up, and he knows the intricacies of what's happening on offense, defense, and special teams. There's some dumb narratives out there on the internet about YSU and how Doug Phillips doesn't know anything about the X's and O's. Guys, if he didn't know anything about the X's and O's, he wouldn't be a head football coach at Youngstown State University. That's one of the most ridiculous things I have ever heard. This guy knows what's happening. Like he's not oblivious to what's happening in a football game. It's not like he goes out on the field and he's standing on the sideline and he's confused by what Mike Yurcich is running on offense. Like he knows what they're doing. But what he does, again, he gives his coordinators freedom. And that's a good thing because you don't want a head coach that is trying to override his offensive coordinator. You don't want a head coach that's trying to override his defensive coordinator, because when there's that tension between the head coach and a coordinator, that really questions the trust level there between those two coaches. And then the players start to question, who can I trust? How can I trust that what this guy's calling on offense is actually accurate if my head coach is constantly arguing and clashing with my coordinator? So again, this coaching staff I think is more than capable. I think Doug Phillips has done a phenomenal job these last two off seasons in assembling a staff, especially with Mike Yurcich, Ryan Remigio, and I hope this Thomas Fletcher hire turns into a home run. But this is one of the better staffs, certainly in the Missouri Valley. It might be one of the better staffs in the country with that trio we have of Fletcher, Yurcich, and then Remigio. All right, let's move on to the next question here. Carmen Marinucci says, if the defense has improved and the coaches learned from the Yale game, then yes. To answer that question about the Yale game and has this coaching staff learned from the Yale game, I think honestly we 100% have. They implemented finish drills into some of the practice cycles they have. There's finish talks after almost every practice. That has been really the main emphasis of this offseason, has been finish, and that has been a big theme. I talked about it. Finish drills, finish periods, finish every rep, all that stuff. That has been emphasized over and over. And I would be surprised with such an experienced team if this YSU team is not able to grasp that concept of we have to finish. Bo Brongard probably doesn't want that Yale loss to ever happen again. Mike Wells on defense doesn't want that to happen again. These guys have learned what it takes to finish a game at this point, and I would be surprised if we don't learn how to really throttle down on teams in the second half and finish games. So thanks for your question. Next one, James Guy Jr. says it all starts with belief. Let's go. Yes, sir. Yes, sir, James Guy Jr. That's 100% accurate. It all starts with belief. Coach Spack for Illinois State last season, he said in his post-game press conference after the national championship game that his team believed that they could beat anybody. That's what fueled that run, and I think you saw that when they upset North Dakota State. They believed that they could beat anybody in the country. You saw that when they made that magical run. You need a team that's all bought in, entirely bought in on one vision, and let's go. Appreciate you, James Guy Jr. Penguins report says defense, more defense. I've talked a lot about the defense here on this episode. Short and simple, but my guy's 100% right. I mean, nobody is questioning this offense with Bo Brungard back. If this defense goes from allowing around 31 points per game to somewhere in the low 20s, this team is deadly in the playoffs. I would not want to play this team at all in the postseason. That's probably the biggest swing factor in 2026. I'll say this is probably the last thing I'm going to talk about with this defense. Ryan Remigio last season, I don't know how much Mercyhurst football you guys follow. Probably not much. I watch way too much football. Talk to me about it another day. But Mercyhurst's offense last season was atrocious. Despite that, Ryan Remigio's defense single-handedly won Mercyhurst several games. Let me pull up their schedule here from last season. But what is so impressive about what Coach Remigio did last season is the fact that his defense, I think they held 7 teams to under 20 points and won several games just because of their defense. That's not easy to do. If your offense is non-existent and your defense is constantly being thrown onto the field, it's not easy to perform like that when you're getting fatigued and gassed. All right, let's go through some of the performances here. So he held Youngstown State to 24 points. That's not an easy offense to shut down. We saw what we could do offensively last season. He held the national champions to 17 points with his defense. They beat LIU 22-13. They held LIU to 13 points. They beat Wagner 19-7. Stonehill, they lost, but they only gave up 22 points. They beat St. Francis 16-15. Like, come on, guys. That's a defensive game if I've ever heard of that. They won a game by 1 point because they held a team to 15 points. That's nothing to do with the offense. They beat Robert Morris 27-13. They held a team to 13 points. So what I'm trying to get at here is that Coach Remigio knows how to keep teams out of the end zone. I think our scoring defense is going to improve. Our total defense is going to improve. And I think our secondary is going to improve. So to emphasize your point, Penguins report, you were 100% right. Defense, more defense. But we got to trust the defensive coordinator that we brought in. And I think Coach Remigio is more than capable of holding teams to under 20 points per game. Final question here, I think. Yes, these are a lot of questions. I probably should have been more selective with the questions I had. But at Doug, you are a goat on Twitter. Love the Twitter handle. This guy's awesome. Best QB in the FCS, new DC, unfinished business, Penguins all the way. Let's go, Doug. That's a great way to summarize this season. Best quarterback in the subdivision, new defensive coordinator with an excellent track record, and maybe the biggest motivator of all, unfinished business. That salty loss to the Yale game is going to be remembered every day inside that football game. There's probably not a moment that team and that coaching staff doesn't think about that game. Heck, I can't even stop thinking about that game. I still remember that game, and it's been several months since that happened. So if this team channels that disappointment the right way with that Yale loss, it has everything it needs to make a serious run to Nashville, and I think YSU has learned their lesson from the Yale game. It is going to enter 2026 firing on all 3 cylinders, a 3-quart chain. I love that. I love the way my guy Kenneth Donaldson phrased that. We're a 3-quart chain. I can't wait. So, to close, appreciate everyone that reached out and interacted. There was a lot of engagement with this episode. Super excited to keep cranking out this preseason content. I have taken an opportunity to write for Florida State, but I want to make sure we're cranking out YSU content because YSU is frankly in a much better position than Florida State right now. So yeah, this is going to be a fun offseason. We're in July, man. The next time the calendar flips to the next month, man, it's go time. It's football season. We're almost here. Fall camp is almost here. This is an exciting time of the year, and this is a season that YSU fans ought to be really excited about. And if you're not excited about next season's team, there's something, frankly, that's very wrong with you. But that's going to do it for this edition of the Penguin Nation Fans Podcast. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Make sure to leave the show a 5-star review and continue to support the podcast on social media. For now, I'm Gino Leone, and as always, go Gwids.